Hey everybody, today, here it is, and you see the color of the wall in here. I'm here in Florida, but that doesn't mean anything has changed at all. It hasn't. Look at my shirt and look at the wall. Look at what color you see. And oh, look at this pillow. I don't know if you're able to see it, but oh yeah, here it is. Well, you see what color most of it is. It's blue. All of this in here, and oh, by the way, look at my chair. You see it? It's blue. This room is blue. Oh, and look at the painting over there. It's blue too. So all of this, as you can see, is blue. And today, blue is a big color. So I'm going to talk with you about why blue, and as a fan of Carolina, is today. Because of the Duke-Carolina game, it is the battle of the blues, baby. And I'm going to talk with you about some of my favorite memories of the rival, the Duke, North Carolina UNC Tar Heels game. One of my favorite memories was in 2007, Gerald Henderson and the broken nose. If you Google that, what happened was Tyler Hansbrough against Duke in the rival today went up and went for a shot inside the paint, and Gerald Henderson for Duke, for North Carolina, Tyler Hansbrough went up. Gerald Henderson fouled him and he fell. And then blood, so he had to go to the March Madness and wear a crystal clear mask. A mask. Players wear them. Blood was coming out. So in a game in Winston-Salem, my hometown, in March Madness against Michigan State, his mask came off in 2007. It's one of those things that really stands out against the big rival, about the big rival today. People don't forget it. People haven't forgotten when Tyler Hansbrough's face mask after Gerald Henderson and the broken nose came out during that tournament championship game, regional bracket game. They do remember, when his mask came off. That is one. Shane Battier flopping. Does anybody remember when Shane Battier flopped? That was in Krzyzewski's, 6th year in the 90s, that was. He's been there for 42 years, until last year. I'm going to get to the greatest Final Four, they say, ever, which I left in another comment. I beg to differ. I thought it was 2017, but that's another story. But here in a bit, I'm going to talk about last year, Brady Manek and the Caleb Love dagger, okay? Okay, Gerald Henderson and the broken nose. We went over that. Shane Battier flopping. So that was in the mid-90s, I guess, maybe, whenever Shane Battier played at Duke. So he flopped. He went up for a flop shot. And they say in that video of the Holderness family, who's from my state, North Carolina, they're down in Raleigh, the famous influencers, right? That guy who was parroting Hamilton last year said, be sure to hold your pillows tight. You know what? I hope Duke gets beat, knocked off to the Tar Heels tonight. So, Shane Battier, when he flopped, there was one in the 1990s that was number 2 when they were. My dad was at this game, and the Dean Dome. Duke was number 1, Carolina was number 2, and they beat them. That was with, I don't know if it was with Antoine Jameson, but Dean Smith was the coach. Dean Smith. Yeah. And I remember my dad was at that game, and it was just one of those memories. So Carolina was down, and it was a great comeback too. Carolina was down by, 15 at the half? And then Duke, scored some points, which made them down by 20, 25, and eventually 30. But then, so Carolina scored 35 points in the second half, I think it was. And they cut it to 10 with about 5 minutes to go. And I think Donald, what was his name? Donald, that played on the team with the Fab Five in 93. Donald Williams, I think it was, came and scored 3, okay? And that cut it to 7 with about 5 minutes and 10 seconds to go. And then they shot another 3 after it was Duke's ball. The ref called it or something. And then Carolina got the rebound and scored. The place Dean Dome was going crazy. 21,000 people. And so they were waving their Tar Heel flags and stuff like that. And so then Carolina came back and won the game. Won it. Not only that, but they dominated over Duke, and they ran out on the court. That stood out. I think that was 93. And then one of the heartbreaking losses, I was at one of them. This was in 2015, I believe it was. They came to Chapel Hill. This was under Roy Williams, okay? And so I think Tyler Zeller may have been on that team. I know that Stillman White was on that team as well. And so were, I forget who else. Ty Lawson had been gone since 2009. He was a senior. I'm not sure who was on that team. Maybe, I know Tyler Hansbrough wasn't. Tyler Zeller was on that team. I forget who else. Maybe, oh boy, who else? Wayne Ellington, I think he might have been. I'm not 100% sure. But if he was a senior. But Carolina, maybe Marcus, I know Marcus Page was there. It was his first year, or his junior year, right? Sophomore, maybe. He was there, but so Carolina in the first half looked like they were hanging in there with Duke. But Duke came back all of a sudden and beat the heck out of Carolina, us. Oh, boy. I don't know if I think Marvin Bagley III might have been on that team, maybe. If he was a sophomore, second year. But that was a heartbreaker. Carolina did well until the very end. The final score was maybe, I don't remember, I could be off, but 21-15 maybe. Carolina played a good, or no, maybe 31-25, maybe. I think it may have been closer to that. 21-35 Duke. Maybe. But Carolina played a good game, fought hard, but they just didn't look good toward the end of the second half. Okay, let's get on to last year. Of course, we all know what happened last year. Brady Manek, right? Everyone on this team -1. Caleb Love sending Coach K in his last game on his court. That was one, but that was one of the greats ever. We had beaten them 3 times last year out of 4. The only time we didn't beat them was in Chapel Hill. Coach K grabbed his wife's arm, got off the court at the end of the first rival. We played them 4 times last year. 4, which is unusual. Got off with his wife, and they applauded him like, we still like you, Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, we still appreciate you, we like you, you were a good coach, but we know that this is your last year, But then they go down the road across town 8 miles, right? Yeah, to Durham, across the way from Chapel Hill, 8 miles away from the Dean Dome, a month or so later to Cameron Indoor, which was this time of year, a year ago this time about. And one of the greatest games, it may have been a little late, it was a little bit later than now, but it was it was closer to March, okay? It was closer to March. It was a little later than now. It was in the second game, It was in March. Not this time. A year ago this time was in Chapel Hill. But exactly March, okay? The second game, which was like on March 4th or something, they go to Duke where Hubert Davis and John Shire are meeting tonight. And so Hubert goes to play Coach K, okay? And then Brady Manek comes and lights it up on Coach K's court in his final game at Duke at Cameron Indoor. And guess what happens? Carolina wins, and they celebrate on Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. And then on ACC Network, the lady interviews Caleb Love, I think Armando Bacot, and Brady Manek. I think it was Caleb Love. Maybe RJ. I think it was actually RJ Davis. Armando Bacot and Brady Manek. Yeah. And she says, what was it like? People were going crazy out there at Cameron Indoor, out there. Going nuts. They were smiling. They had a big smile on their face. And Brady Manek was like, I'm happy. I'm just happy we're winning. People went nuts. It was awesome. And so, but then comes March. Carolina, March Madness, the big dance, the big dance. We play all these teams. We go to Texas, we go out there, and in that big, humongous Dickies Arena Stadium. We go on that big court, right? And we play the ever-living heck out of Baylor because of Brady Manek. That's who made it happen. He was a special animal. Brady Manek was an animal. And honestly, he should be more recognized. So Brady Manek comes in to that big stadium out there in Texas, in Fort Worth, at the Dickies Arena, on that big court against Baylor in the regionals right? Or the second round. Won the Sweet 16 yet, won the Elite 8 yet, Elite 8. But it was like the second round of the regionals, Midwestern, right? Keep in mind there are three regions: the Western, the Midwestern, and the Eastern, or Northern, yeah. Or way south here, Florida, whatever, yeah. And Brady Manek comes and lights it up against Baylor. Baylor does well. Scott Drew's team does well in the first half. But Carolina and Hubert Davis come out and beat the crap out of Baylor. And so we advance because of Brady Manek. All because of him, Brady Manek. And then we go play other teams. We go to Philadelphia and play the St. Peter's Peacocks, the Cinderella team. And Duke has their own little bracket or whatever. Yeah. And then eventually Duke won and we won by being St. Peter's, UCLA. What was it? UCLA. At one point, people didn't think that Carolina would be in it. But after a game in my hometown against Wake Forest, Steve Forbes' team beat them. He got on the bus and said, guys, Hubert did, and he said, guys, I'd like to go to the tournament. Wouldn't you like to go to March Madness? That would be fun. I want to play in it. I want you guys to get the feel, because keep in mind the year before, they didn't do it. They've never been to March Madness. For them, it was a new experience. They had fun playing in it, the tournament, because COVID was the year before, right? They couldn't be in there, right? And it was Roy Hubert didn't win there, but a lot of those guys weren't there. A couple of them. The only one who I think was there that year may have been Leaky Black that year, but it was all under a bubble. It was in Indianapolis at the time, because at the time COVID isn't like it was then. It's not. But I'm just saying that's another deal. But so Leaky Black's the only player at all that was on that COVID year. Only that year was definitely never will be again like that. And only in Indianapolis. He only got that experience. Nobody else did. Well, maybe, I don't know if Caleb Love or Baycott did, but we had Walker Kessler, who transferred to, what was it, Alabama? Anyway, okay, back to what I'm saying. He said, wouldn't it be fun after that loss to Wake Forest if we could go back to the tournament? Who would have ever thunk that it would be the Battle of the Blues again? But we also beat them in the ACC tournament in Brooklyn, New York, right before March Madness. We did. We beat Duke. But, so the long story short, the bracket gets smaller and smaller to Duke and Carolina. We play St. Peter's. Duke plays whoever it was. I can't remember who they played. I think it may have been, I'm not 100% sure, but I'd like to say it was somebody like, maybe, I could be off here too, but Oklahoma maybe, I'm not sure. Or Wisconsin maybe. They play them, and guess what? New Orleans comes. We play them again, which some people thought may have happened, but they didn't know. But a lot of people didn't ever guess. And Carolina was not even in the top seed of March Madness. They come back to Chapel Hill in camaraderie, and it was like the Beatles were in town. I'm not kidding. It was like Chapel Hill was like the fans were out waiting for Hubert, and they all come and cheer, and they're like, we're home again. We go to New Orleans. They get on the bus. It was like the Beatles, honestly. For college basketball, the Beatles had just flown from Liverpool, England, to New York, to JFK, and the fans, people were out there. The Beatles are coming. The British are coming, or whatever. The Beatles are in town. And then that night they go to Ed Sullivan, and everyone, it's the talk of the town in New York, right? And then people are just waiting outside at the Ed Sullivan Theater. It was like that. People were waiting for Caleb Love, R.J. Davis, and all this. Armando Bacot and Hubert Davis. They were fired up outside the Dean Dome, outside the Smith Center. And so they get on the bus and they wave goodbye, and fans are jumping up and down and cheering, hollering. And so we go to New Orleans. And so we play them. And we know what Caleb Love does at the very end. The place goes nuts. It was historic. We go to New Orleans to the Final Four, the rival. I'm talking about this because of tonight, all of this. And so we go to New Orleans, and then Caleb Love makes the shot to send Coach K in his last game. And he's like, oh, big time delivery. Who could ever forget that? That was the greatest ever image to this day. Oh, big time delivery for the top of the key. Oh, big time delivery. That was Caleb Love. And the place was going absolutely berserk. And so they come out on Franklin Street like it's the World Cup in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And so they get the bonfire ready and all this stuff. And so some people say that was the greatest, but I think 2017, which I commented on in another video. But, okay, let's see if we can beat them again tonight for a fourth time in 1 year. Let's see. Go Heels. This will be John Shires and Hubert Davis's first ever meeting tonight. It's historic. It is, honestly. The new era tonight, too. It's not as historic as last year, but it is very historic tonight. Absolutely, it's historic in its own right. Go Tar Heels. I hope we win. Turn it around. And peace. Watch the Duke Carolina game. It's a big deal. Go Heels.